Andrew over. Fran.
Okay, well thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Obviously we've got an hour for these meetings, but what I'll try and do, if it's okay, is rattle through some of the backgrounds of what we're talking about, where we started, the talks we've been in, the consequences of those talks, and obviously the recommendation that the GC is making. And that's going to take me a few minutes, but I think it's worthwhile people having a bit of an understanding of the background to all of this, because we started off at the middle of October 2015, sorry, the middle of summer 2015, with DWP management coming to PCS and saying they were looking at longer opening hours. And then after that, to be honest, it went a bit quiet. We didn't hear much more, but in the autumn, on the back of the 1% pay cap being imposed for the multiple year running, we launched a pay campaign. If you think back to the autumn of 2015, about 6,000 members wrote to their MP, wrote to the Permanent Secretary, wrote to the Secretary of State, and also wrote to PCS explaining what it was like being a low-paid worker in the DWP. And some of the stories were heartbreaking. There were stories of our members using food banks, taking second jobs, 40% in employment benefits, because the pay in the DWP has become so low over a period of time. So on the back of all of that, a House of Commons debate was instigated by Chris Stevens, who's the chair of the PCS parliamentary group. He's an MP in Scotland, and he raised the issue of low pay in the DWP, and it was debated by all parties in the House of Commons. And as a result of that, after SR15 was announced, the spending review for 2015, DWP approached us to say that they had been granted what they describe as pay flexibility. Pay flexibility means the ability to break the 1% cap, but in exchange for changes to working hours and terms and conditions. Now clearly, the first question you ask yourself is, should PCS talk to the management in terms of a discussion that links the two issues? And I think that the answer to that has to be that had we put our fingers in our ears and refused to talk, it wouldn't have made the issues go away, and the issues would very much have still been on the table. But obviously our job as negotiators was to go into those talks, find out exactly what management was saying, see what we could get in terms of concessions, in terms of a deal that was on offer, come out to members and consult members, and then allow members to vote in all members' ballot. And that's the process we're now involved in. There'll be members' meetings like this taking place all over the UK between now and the end of May. There'll be a conference debate at the PCS Group Conference on the 23rd of May. At the 6th of June to the 22nd of June, there will be an all-members ballot where every one of you will get a vote in that ballot about the deal and what it contains. And then after that, depending on the outcome of the ballot, the DWP will either impose or it will be offered to staff. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail after I've explained the offer, because the offer is a 4-year deal. It starts 2016. The last year of the 4 years will begin July 2019. The cost of the offer just in year one alone is 46 million. And over 79,000 staff are in scope for the offer. So in other words, AAs, AOs, EOs and HEOs all qualify or are all part of the scope for the offer. Under the terms of the offer, 37% of the staff will receive an increase of between 15 and 21.6% in their pay. 57% will receive an increase of between 10% and 21.6% over the 4 years. Everybody will receive more than 1% for each of the 4 years of the deal, and there will be just one single rate of pay in each of the grades that are in scope. So instead of having a pay scale where you come in at the bottom and you never actually reach the top, or it takes you years to reach the max, everybody will be on one single rate of pay. Over 93% of staff in those grades will reach the spot rate for the lifetime of the deal. The only reason that 100% of the staff don't reach the spot rate for the life of the deal is because the Treasury have imposed a cap on any individual civil servant receiving a pay increase of more than 5% in any 1 year. And because the increases for some people lower down the grades are so great, even with 5% increase every year for the 4-year deal, they won't hit the spot rate by 2019. This government are unable to legislate for what happens in the next parliament, and therefore, even though they will move up by 5% every year, if they don't reach the spot rate by the end of the 4-year deal, this government are unable to say what the next government would need to do about that. But obviously from PCS's perspective, anybody who didn't hit the spot rate within the 4 years, we would enter negotiations with the new government as soon as they're imposed to take up that issue and to make sure we were able to progress their pay scales. The new single rate of pay, or the spot rate for the job, will be set or pitched at 0.5% above HMRC max for the life of the deal. So if you think about what HMRC max is now, this will track at 0.5% above for every year of the 4 years, and for the first time it will bring the DWP in line, if not slightly higher than the HMRC in terms of a single rate of pay. I'm based in the PCS Leeds office. The two biggest issues we get raised with us on pay are lack of progression and lack of parity with other government departments. This deal does do both of those things. It removes the issue of progression at a time when Osborne is saying he's not going to allow progression in the civil service anymore because you will be on a single rate for the job. It removes the issue of us being at the biggest department but also on the lowest pay because it's the first time it will pitch us just above the HMRC max. There is an online tool on the intranet. I'd be astonished if people haven't found it and looked on it, and I'd be astonished if it hasn't crashed by now, because I think the whole of the DWP will be out there looking at what this means to them. But I think in the context of what we're talking about, it's important to understand where people are on the pay scales now, because 53% of AAs are not currently on their max, 69% of AOs are not currently on their max, 61% of EOs are not currently on their max, and 71% of HEOs are not currently on their max. So straight away, you can see for people that haven't reached their max, this will be large increases for an awful lot of those staff. It is the case, and there's no getting away from it, that people on their max will not see their pay increase by anything like people on the minimum for their grade. But it's also the case that if you're ever going to move to a single rate of pay in a department or a spot rate, you have to increase the min by more than the max, otherwise you never achieve it. What you end up doing is just gradually shifting the pay scale further along, and people never actually have the ability to reach max. So it won't be popular with everybody because it will clearly mean different things to different people, but it will mean for the first time one rate of pay for the job, which is a long-standing aim of the trade unions. So we've got a spot rate. I won't labour the point about the London pay zones because nobody here is in London, but basically at the moment there are outer London and inner London pay zones. They're being merged to form one London rate of pay. All of this is slightly further complicated by the fact that the Tories have pledged to introduce a national living wage in this country by 2020. If they stick to their pledge, and that's a huge if, and I'm not going to try and answer for the Tory government, but if they stick to their pledge, by 2020, the minimum wage for people in this country will be £9 an hour. It is a fact that regardless of any of this, if you're an AA working in this department, this deal does get you to £9 an hour, but you would get there anyway if the national living wage legislation goes through. And obviously, you can't guarantee what the government are going to do, but clearly that is the pledge they're making. The AO grade will be at £9.35 an hour, which again is in line with or above national living wage legislation, but there are huge pressures on the government around the living wage, and there are no guarantees that it will end up where they say it will. It's important to understand the constraints that the Treasury have imposed. The pay bill can't increase by more than 2.7% in any 1 year. No individual can receive more than 5% increase in any 1 year, and pay flexibility is only available in exchange for contractual arrangements around hours and mobility. So there'll be a national pay zone, there'll be a London pay zone, and people on special location pay zones where it's incredibly expensive to live outside of London, places like Oxford and Milton Keynes, will eventually merge with the national grades. In terms of the pay increase, if you have a look at the PCS briefing, which is on the website, I'm sure most of you have seen it, it does set out a table which explains exactly how much pay will go up by if you're on the minimum of your grade or if you're on the maximum of your grade. And then there's a separate table that shows you what you would get if you're in between the two. And basically there's a set amount that each grade's pay will move up by year on year, until either the min catches them up, because as I've said, the min will be going up quicker than the max, so either the min will catch them up and after that they'll move up in line with the min, or they'll hit the max, at which point they'll move on in line with people on the max. There are some small gains around things like poor performance. At the moment, if you're a poor performer in this department on a must-improve box marking, you don't get a pay increase. And if you move out of poor performance during the year, you don't get a pay increase until the following year. Under these arrangements, as soon as somebody's deemed to no longer be a poor performer, they immediately move to the rate of pay that's been set for the DWP for their grade for that year. So it does get them a pay increase an awful lot quicker. It's important for me to explain to you the opt-out and the reason behind the opt-out, because it is the case that PCS negotiated the opt-out. DWP wanted 100% collective agreement. So in other words, if the ballot is won in June, they wanted everybody automatically put onto these arrangements. And we argued that for the person, there will be a distinction contradiction between people who feel they can't and people who bluntly feel they don't want to do what the department wants them to do. And for those people that feel that they're just not prepared to sign up to this deal, we felt it was important to negotiate an opt-out. Right up until the closing day of negotiations finished at 9 o'clock on the Friday night in the middle of April. They were adamant that they would only pay 0% to people who opted out, because a number of other government departments don't increase pay by 1% year on year. If you take the HMRC as an example, what they do is they increase staff pay by 0.5%, and they use the remainder of the money to shorten the pay scales and to give more to people on the minimum of the grade. In the DWP, when we've had a 1% cap, we've always flattened it out across the board. So what they've agreed now, under pressure from PCS at about 8 o'clock at night, was that they would pay something for those that opt out. They will pay 0.25%. We don't think it's good enough, and we're determined to go back and try and renegotiate that, and they've agreed to re-enter negotiations on that issue every year of the deal. But as a minimum, people who opt out would still get the non-consolidated payment. They would receive a consolidated increase of 0.25%, and they would be able to hang on to their legacy contract in terms of working hours. And most of us who are on a legacy contract, if DWP don't keep the contract. So if you can find a contract for yourself, it will say that your contracted hours on a legacy contract are 8:36 to 5 p.m. And if for you the most important issue is keeping to those legacy contracts or those legacy hours, then clearly that will be the choice you make. You will forfeit a bigger pay increase to retain the right to only be asked to work hours between 8:36 and 5 p.m. You can volunteer to work additional hours or extra hours or different hours, but your contracted hours remain at 8:36 to 5 Monday to Friday, and that would be a consequence you choose as a result of opting out. I need to talk about the non-consolidated pot, because as long as I've been doing pay negotiations, the non-consolidated pot in the DWP has been set at 1.9%. It continues to be set at 1.9% this year and next year, but it is true that the money from the non-consolidated pot has gone to fund this increase. So in year 3 it reduces from 1.9% to 0.9%, and in year 4 it reduces to 0.4%. If you've ever read union literature, you'll know that one of our aims has always been to try and get non-consolidated bonus payments stopped in favour of putting the money into consolidated pay so that it becomes pensionable, and so that people benefit from it month on month and don't just benefit from it as a one-off payment. This does achieve that, but clearly the cost for that is that the value of the pot overall does go down over the life of the deal. It is also the case that the DWP are now the only government department to pay performance bonus for the achieved box marking. In almost every other government department now, they only pay performance money for an exceptional box marking. We've been able to argue to hang on to it for the achieved, but on the basis that our workers are low paid. What they argue now is that during the life of the deal, because they're putting the rates of pay up, the non-consolidated pot will certainly reduce in value. There's a table in the circular that tells you what the amounts are. They're not widely different from what they've been in any other year, but as I say, over the life of the deal that will change, because the value of the pot overall will go down. All allowances will continue as now and increase by 1%, with the exception of EWHA. It is absolutely the case that DWP intend to phase out EWHA, but it's also the case that when they looked at the payments that are made to people due to EWHA, they vary between the lowest payment, which was £7.50, and the highest payment, which was over £4,000. So it's quite clear there are people that rely heavily on EWHA and people that very rarely, if ever, claim it. But a number of people will have a contractual right to it, but not claim it because they're not being asked to work those hours. It is the case that they'll do away with EWHA, but we were able to negotiate a 36-month lead-in period to that. So if people are claiming it currently, have been claiming it at any time in the last 18 months and are asked to work hours that qualify for it in the next 36 months, that they will retain their right to EWHA. But by July 2019, it is the case that that will be scrapped. Members not on DWP terms and conditions, transferring on 2P or COSOC, can choose whether to stay with their ex-employer's terms and conditions or come on to DWP terms and conditions, with the exception of members that come into DWP from the HMRC on universal credit, because their management have pre-decided that in year 1 they will retain HMRC pay rates. Well, which is unfortunate actually, because they'd be better off financially under the terms of the DWP offer than they would under their own, because they don't pay for a G box marking and they only pay a 0.5 increase year on year. The next bit of the offer is, in our view, unnecessary. It shouldn't have been in here, and it has been written, I'll be completely upfront about it, it's been written by people that don't work flexi. But it is written in there very much because of the introduction of universal credit. If you remember, when people moved in to start working on universal credit, the intention was to schedule everybody for 37 hours a week. So you would have fixed start time, fixed lunch time, and fixed time of going home. People weren't prepared to work under those conditions, and took industrial action to prevent universal credit ways of working being introduced. And as a result, the concession that we got in order to resolve the dispute, that people now fix one end of their day. So either you guarantee a start time so that DWP can be assured that they have cover at that end of the day, but because you've guaranteed that start time, as long as you work a minimum of 3 hours 42, you can leave at any time you choose without line management permission, or you fix an end of the day, so you guarantee that you're going to be there to cover the phones between, say, 4 and 5, but because you fix the end of the day, as long as you've worked at least 3 hours 42, it doesn't matter what time you come in, because they are assured of having that cover at that end of the day where you've been fixed. It's not perfect, it doesn't work anywhere, it won't work in vast swathes of the department. That's why we think it's unhelpful to have it written into the agreement, but because universal credit is the way that the DWP is working towards, they wanted something in there that details the way that people who are scheduled will work, and that will be an improvement for people who work in contact centres who are currently scheduled for all of their day. It won't be so good for people who currently work in an area where they're not scheduled at all, and the DWP are going to introduce scheduling. So it is part of the arrangement that they will introduce this fixing one end of the day or the other where people are scheduled. It's also the case that they're quite vague about what they're going to do in terms of extended working hours. It's quite clear that the basis on which they've got the money is to say to the Treasury, we will provide a service between 7:45 in the morning and 8 PM at night, and we will provide a service on Saturdays. But that doesn't mean that every part of the business will be working those hours, and it doesn't mean that people will see vast changes anytime soon. There will be no change at all to current working times before October 17. There will be a complete review of every directorate in the next 12 months. After that, they intend to introduce longer hours in some parts of the business on an incremental basis. So, for example, October 2017, at the moment, people working on UC are there till 5 o'clock. They will eventually extend that till 6 o'clock and longer in the longer term, but it doesn't mean people will see an immediate change. Where it won't be quite the same is in CMG, because people are already, in some cases, contracted to cover longer opening hours, and that won't change. The only change that's for CMG, which I think is positive, is their CMG management have had to concede that the right to paid breaks, which they took away a number of years ago, has now been rescinded, and everybody's got a right to 2 paid breaks of 15 minutes. So, you know, I know that that's been a big issue in some parts of CMG, but it was something that was withdrawn.
We've not been told that.
When the deal's brought in, they will have to acknowledge that there will be paid breaks. So in terms of the money, there are some good things. There's pay progression, getting rid of the fact that you move, you know, you're never endingly on a scale before you reach max. So on the pay negotiating team, I'm on my max, so we put my details into a calculator, and I'll be honest, it's not life-changing for me. It's 1.6 for every year of the deal. But the woman sitting next to me is an EO, and she's been in grade 9 years, and she's tracked 1 point above the bare minimum for 9 years, because pay progression hasn't really happened in the 9 years that she's been an EO. So for her, it'll mean a pay increase of nearly £4,000, and when we put her details into a calculator, you could see that the sums were quite significant for her. So it will mean different things for different people. There's no getting away from that. It will pay the rate for the job. There'll be one rate for the job, which is a policy that we've been trying to achieve for a number of years. It will bust the Treasury pay cap of 1%, and it will bring our pay in line with other departments. But more important than all of that, it will contractualise has the right to these pay increases. If we get a new Secretary of State next year, or a new Permanent Secretary, and they say, look, I'm really sorry, the money's not there, the right to these pay increases is contractualised on taking up the deal. So you have an automatic right to take the money no matter what happens in this department over the next 4 years of the deal. there are some not so great things. We would have loved to have had everybody, 100% of the staff on the spot rate. We haven't achieved that. As I say, it'll be 93% of the staff, but that is because the people not on the maps are getting big increases that can't exceed 5% year on year, and even with those 5% increases, they still don't get to the spot rate. It is important to understand the safeguards we've negotiated, and I'll go on to explain why. Under these rules, if they bring in this sort of scheduled approach in other parts of the business, which is not inconceivable, there are a number of safeguards that PCS has managed to put in place. One is that nobody can be asked to work more than one late a week. So by late currently, they mean 5 o'clock. Obviously, in other parts of the business, that will gradually extend to 6 o'clock and then 7 o'clock. So if you're asked to work a late, you won't be asked to work more than one late a week. No one can be asked to work more than one Saturday and 4. So again, if you're asked to work that, you can volunteer and say, actually, it suits me to work Saturday, but for somebody who doesn't want to, there is no more than one Saturday in any 1 month. Nobody can be asked to work more than 5 days in any 7. So there won't be a case of anybody being asked to work more hours than you work now. If you work 25 hours for the department now, you'll work 25 hours for the department under these new arrangements. But the opening hours will be longer, so therefore the 25 hours you work might be a different 25 hours than the ones you do currently. Anybody who has to work a Saturday is still entitled to a 2-day rest break, and if you want 2 consecutive days, the logic would be that you could have the Monday off. You don't have to have the Monday off, and you might choose to have a day off the previous week, but if you say, for me, the most important thing is to have a 48-hour rest break, you will have that in exchange for working a Saturday. They're not clear, as I say, about when they will extend opening hours, and there will be some areas of the business where they won't extend them at all. We've also negotiated an independent panel. The panel will be that if you have a decision made about your working hours that you're not content with, at the moment you would take a grievance, the grievance would be won and lost. If it was lost, you'd have the right of appeal. You'd probably find that the appeal manager was somewhere in the line management chain, the person who made the decision about the grievance. That would be decided on, and that would be the end of the line for you. Under these arrangements, if you get to that stage and you're not satisfied with the decision made by the independent decision maker, you then take it to an independent panel which will be set up between PCS and management, so it will be union reps and managers sitting on a panel to look independently at decisions outside of the line management chain. That's the first time it's been introduced, but if anybody's familiar with the Transfer Hardship Committee, it will be a little bit like that, because that's also a panel that's set up between management and the unions. It's probably going to be at a regional or OSN level. The Equality Act obviously applies, and there's no getting away from that. It's the law and they have to honour it. But beyond that, there is also a safeguard around people with care and responsibilities or personal circumstances that mean that they can't work particular hours. And the law doesn't stipulate an age where it's okay to leave kids. There'll be some 12-year-olds you'd feel happy leaving for an hour. There'll be some 16-year-olds you wouldn't feel happy leaving for an hour. So there's no set in law that there's a certain age where you can leave kids. Therefore, it's what's reasonable in your circumstances, and that will constitute the one-to-one discussion that you have with your line manager. And as a result of that discussion, again, if you're not satisfied, that's where the panel kicks in. But we would say to people with care and responsibilities, don't think that because you've got care responsibilities you should opt out. You're exactly the people that should opt in, because you would have safeguards that protected you, that would be escalated if necessary right up to national level and the permanent secretary, because we want to make sure that when this being introduced, people aren't disadvantaged because they have care responsibilities. But in terms of personal circumstances, they also cover things like public transport and reasons why people can't work particular hours. I need to just touch briefly on the mobility policy, because if you've heard people from the union speak before, you'll have heard of the people and location strategy. The people and location strategy is the DWP looking at their estate and thinking in the longer term they need to manage with less buildings than they currently have. They currently occupy somewhere between 800 and 900 buildings. Over a period of time, with the renewal of the prime contract, they will be looking to occupy less buildings. Because of the uncertainty around people and locations, because they haven't published a list and they haven't shared with anybody, including the unions, which offices will scope under people and locations, they have given we've managed to negotiate a further safeguard, and that is that anybody whose office is faced with closure under the people and location strategy, or is faced with a move because of the people and location strategy, will have a choice about which mobility policy they're treated under. They can be treated under the legacy mobility policy, which currently applies to them, or they can choose the new mobility policy that kicks in with the employee deal. So the idea there is that the individual chooses the one that's most beneficial for them. It's also the case that the new mobility policy is the CSET policy. It's not specific to DWP, and it moves away from the idea of a fixed amount of time that's reasonable to get to a location, and replaces that with what's reasonable, taking into account fair, lawful, safe, transparent, and any move to a new location can only be a decision that's reasonable. In law, that's, you know, what's reasonable, and that's the bit that will be open to interpretation, and that's why it's important to have a safeguard of a panel, and also the idea that it can be escalated via the union. So there's lots and lots in there that I've talked about, and lots of issues that will obviously be causing people concern and that people will want to discuss. But I think it's probably worth me summing up by telling you about why the union reached the conclusion it reached, and that is to recommend a deal. Because I think we have to look, in some ways it's about balance of forces. If we think we can mount enough industrial action to reject the deal and stop opening hours extended in DWP, then we should say that. There is nothing wrong with saying this isn't good enough and we should strike over it. But if you believe that we can do that, and if you believe that we can mount enough industrial action to stop these opening hours and to smash the public sector pay cap on our own in this department, then you need to say that. But I think the judgment that the GC reached, and it's not about being defeatist, I'm convinced that we would recruit more members on the back of it, but you need to understand the facts as we look at them right now. 61% of this department are currently union members. We've always had 75%, 8% density in the GWP, but with the removal of check-off, we did very, very well, but it's no secret that we lost members, and therefore not everybody is a union member. So for the people that aren't union members, this wouldn't apply to them. 22% of the staff are already on contracts that require them to work these hours. It doesn't mean they work the hours, but they are on contracts where they could be asked to work the hours. So for them, it's a no-brainer. They'll get a pay increase above 1%, and their contract will virtually not change from the contract they currently have. In addition, a number of our members will look at the amounts of money on offer and decide that for them the money is too much to turn down, it's too good to turn down. So in those circumstances, we have to make an assessment about what would be the consequences of rejecting this offer. Do we think we can get more in negotiations? Personally, we don't. Well, I don't, because I know that DWP are saying they will not wait for PCS to deliberate. There will be a ballot result on the 22nd of June. If we reject the offer on the 23rd of June, they will offer this to every individual member of staff. There'll be no collective agreement, there'll be no safeguards, there'll be no guarantees, there'll be no assurances. It will be a direct offer between the employer and the individual member of staff. People will sign up for the first time to individual pay bargaining with no assurances, no guarantees and no safeguards. Is that a position we want to find ourselves in? Is that a position where we could defend our members? I don't think that's the best position to be in. What we would argue instead is that people should accept the offer, because the offer's divisive. There's no getting away from this. 60% of the staff will gain a significant financial increase. If you said to those 60% of the staff, don't take the money, because PCS can get you something better, we'd have to be able to be assured that we could get them something better, that we could do something to make not taking that money worthwhile. And that would mean mounting enough action to stop DWP moving to these new opening hours. So in our view, and it is something we would need to discuss, we believe it's better to accept the offer, bank the money, contractualise the money, contractualise the safeguards, and then defend our members under the strength and the power and the bargaining strength that a collective agreement gives us, which is enforceable in law, as opposed to move away from that and have individuals being offered the right to sign up for this. They would sign up, we would lose our collective strength in terms of the agreement, but we'd also lose all the protections that we've just spent 4 months negotiating. We don't think that's the best position to be in. We understand that this is going to be a difficult decision for people to make, but the power of the collective agreement gives people an opt-out. If they impose this, there won't be an opt-out. There will be people having this, offered to them. You choose to take it or you choose not, and there will be no safeguards in terms of guarantees, the number of nights you'll have to work, the number of Saturdays you'll have to work. And I don't say that to scaremonger. It's because all of the negotiated safeguards are important, and if we think we can manage better without them and without the strength of the collective agreement, we need to say that. So it's not an easy decision, it's not one that we take lightly, and it's not one that people will be dancing from the rooftops about. There will be lots of people that say, I'm on the max, this means bugger all to me financially, and in return I'm being asked to do things that I don't particularly want to do. If you have a reason not to do them and you're protected by any of the safeguards, we would urge you to opt in and use the safeguards, and we will represent every member that does that. If you are not protected by the safeguards and you simply don't want to do what they're asking you to do here, you are covered by the opt-out. We would still urge you to vote to accept the offer and then take the ultimate safeguard, which is opting out in your own personal circumstances that they wouldn't ask you to do. You still need to be part of the planning and the scheduling, but you wouldn't need to be asked to do hours that you're not content to do, except for the ones under your legacy contract. And then obviously it is an individual choice, it is a difficult choice. There's no getting away from it. It means more to some people than it does to others. It means more money to some people than it does others. And for those of us who've been in the department a long time, it means that we won't be getting so much as somebody else who's getting. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying this is crap, this is, you know, we should do something about it. But you have to be able to say what we should do about it, and whether you believe that the industrial action that we could mount in the circumstances I've just described is enough to stop the DWP doing what they're planning on doing anyway on opening hours and contractual changes. If we believe it is, let's have that discussion. If we don't believe it is, then, you know, on balance, we're recommending accepting the offer. There will be lots of issues that members will unite around, and the biggest one will be flexi. When DWP surveyed staff and asked them what was the #1 issue that they held dear working in this department, the answer came back: the right to work, flexible working, the right to manage my day. If there's an attempt to attack or restrict flexi, that's something everybody will be prepared to unite over. The difficulty with pay, and DWP aren't daft, they know this, is it's completely divisive. It splits us down the middle. There will be winners, there will be losers, there will be people that gain a lot, there will be people that don't gain much. But the people that don't gain much will still see an increase in excess of 1% every year of the deal, and they will still be protected by the safeguards if we accept them. If we reject them, as I say, they become merely guidance and they're not enforceable in law or in a contractual agreement. So I've talked for a long time, I'm going to have a swig of water, but I'll open it up for debate, and obviously if anybody's got any questions I'll try and answer. If you've got any comments, I'm happy to take them back to the GEC. There is an all-members ballot. That will be your opportunity to say what you think we should do, and clearly everybody will get a vote. But before that there will be a conference debate, and again your branch will have a mandating meeting where if you have views about that, you need to feed into your branch what they should do or how they should vote when they get to conference. But on balance, that is the recommendation that GEC has made. Sorry, Keith.
Yeah, you say about that the hours not being extended. Why is it in the area that I currently work, PM in BP 6301, they've already brought in 6 o'clock rotas starting from the 18th of April? Why are they doing that and not other areas?
Is that CMG?
No, it's actually Department of Work and Pensions performance measurement.
I know nothing about
Well, they're a department that's built up over the last 2 years in Building 6. They deal with visiting officers and things, ESA, and they've got pension credit.
And they're introducing a 6
and they've got university. Yeah, they've already brought it in from the 18th of April. Why are they doing it now before the rest of DWP?
I'll have to take that away, Keith. I've no idea. I've not heard about that. It's not been escalated to the group or to the GEC, but I'll look into that. If you can drop me an email just with the detail of it, and then I'll take that up and give you an answer.
Right,
but
okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to... Yeah.
Can I ask about the timing?
Yeah.
Because on the internet it says if you decide to opt out, which are likely is 1.3, in 1 year 1.2 means nothing to me, so I'm planning on opting out. It says it has to be on RM by 1st of July?
The timescale, no, but the
1st
of July is the implementation date for the deal. The timescale we've been working to with the department is the ballot closes on the 22nd of June, so there'll be a result from PCS either to accept or reject the offer. On the 23rd of June, they will open up a function on RM where every individual can go into RM and either choose to opt in or opt out. But I would suggest before anybody does that, you have a one-to-one with your line manager first. Every individual member of staff will be offered a one-to-one. And it might be worth having that discussion in terms of what it means for you. I was just...
We were told we do have till September.
Yes, we're told the function will be available for 2 months. The only thing you need to know is once you've pressed the button to opt out, you are opted out for 4 years. You can't change your mind midway through and think, actually, it's not that bad, I'll sign up now. Once you've opted out, you are opted out if it's for 4 years.
Yeah, but surely they're talking about a 4-year scheme there, right? And then you're talking about having this one-to-one discussion with the line manager.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that within those 4 years you're going to have the same line manager and you're going to be in the same job.
No, absolutely not.
So
but the opt-out is a one-off thing.
Yeah, the opt-out's a one-off thing, but your one-to-one discussion to see,
right.
how it would be if you opt in is immaterial, because there's no guarantee. He or she can't give you any guarantees as to what.
No, that's right. All they can do is give you an indication of what their requirements are in the bit of the directorate you work in, and there will be a review in every directorate. There'll be no change to anybody's working hours before October 17 at the earliest. So nothing's going to change overnight. So the one-to-one is really, I suppose, more to get an indication from you about what your views are, what you feel, what you're prepared to work. Is Saturday a no-go for you, or is it something you'd be prepared to consider with enough notice? If you're part-time, for example, they need to give you 6 months' notice of a change of working patterns. So now enable you to say, well, if I had 6 months' notice, I might be able to work one Saturday and 4, but I need to plan for that. So the idea is that the one-to-one is more about sounding you out about what you would do and what you wouldn't do, and then you can, based on their response, you can make a decision about whether or not you sign up or whether you opt in.
I have a couple of issues.
Yeah.
One, I'm one of the ones that's a loser in terms of the older age folks.
Yeah.
And what plans do you have to publish the exceptions? And if people's circumstances do change within the 4 years, which is likely to happen for many members, you're saying there's no safeguard to make any changes once you've opted out. And so is there going to be anything published what the exceptions are going to be, and how fair is the decision
by
process? By
exceptions, do you mean people that won't be asked to...
For whatever reason someone can't work the Saturday or whatever. For me personally, I'm the older ones, I'm going to opt out, end of.
Okay.
But my second question to you is, for being a union member for 40 years, can you honestly stand there and say to me, you've gotten me a good deal at 0.25%?
Nobody's going to describe this.
And you've also, as a union member, which I've read in writing, disgracefully you have said that you don't think you've got sufficient support from other union members to take any strike action. I really think you've gone into, I get the spot rate, I get the bring in line with everyone for fair pay, 150% with that. But you've gone from one unfair system to a more complicated system that everyone's circumstances is going to be different, and there is no way of resolving this.
You talk about a spot rate, you've mentioned it over and over and over again, and one rate for the job. I won't be on the same rate as someone who accepts these changes in their conditions.
No, you won't.
So I'm going to be down there and they're going to be up there. All because I'm not willing to take a £10 a week increase to work a Saturday and a late night.
I understand that, but I'm not, I've worked here for 8 years and I am on the lowest rate and I do a Saturday and a late night.
That's fair.
But I do the same job as somebody who sits next to us who gets paid a lot more.
Steph, I'm not arguing about the rise. The rise is good for those who have got that contract. It's brilliant.
Can I just
For those that haven't, it's rubbish.
I'd like you as represent the union. Can you try and explain to me, please, why I totally get everyone should get the rate for the job. I totally get the young people that's come in. I've worked 40 years. It's unfair if someone's doing the same job, they're not getting the same rate. I get that. What made you think in the union and negotiation processes that you think that this offer that they put on the table to you was going to be acceptable to everyone? You're quoting 22% already working these hours, new intake employees, they're on a new contract. What makes you think the other 78% is going to benefit? No figures are coming out to us to say what solidarity there's going to be. I striked in 1984. I came out for these people to have these conditions, and you are all going to sell with down the river.
Well,
I think
want me to answer?
Do you know what, these people, you haven't got the union representation now because they just don't fully understand. They're none of the wiser. They've come in on this contract, and that's what they don't know that there's something better out there.
Yeah, but I think what you have to appreciate is that, you know, things have changed a lot since 1980, whatever.
They have, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about, would you say
No,
that to
no,
the
no,
miners?
no.
Would you say that
Well,
to
yes,
Emily Pankhurst or whoever's fought for whatever rights we've got in this country now?
Sorry.
If I can just say, it is a judgment. It's not an easy judgment, but it is a judgment about balance of forces. And I take it completely. And if I'm on the max, haven't been in this.
I'm not,
Can I-
I'm nowhere
can I-
near
can I
at
put-
the max.
But if you think that you can say to Steph and her colleagues, don't take the money because we can get something
We
better.
wouldn't
That's
dream
not what
of
I'm
doing
saying. That's not what
that.
I'm
We
saying.
would
I'm
not
saying,
dream of doing that.
what's your thought process to have come to this
Yeah.
conclusion that you
Well,
have to stand there and recommend
yeah.
to us as members that we accept, even though
I
a
think
lot of
it's-
circumstances are never going to reach that spot level.
But is it not an acknowledgement that the force of
It's a start.
the way that a union has now is a far cry from that was that's went
Even
before.
if we had
What?
100% membership, it would always be a judgment. I mean, nobody's going to stand here and tell you this is a fantastic deal, this is a great deal, this is good for people. We know that in a number of people, they will find this not acceptable.
Well, mate,
The difficulty is then deciding what do we do about that. Do we say to people who are benefiting from it financially, don't take the money? Because if you think that's what we should do, we could say that. I could say to people, don't take the 21% pay increase you have been offered here. But then, in order to meet their expectations, we'd have to be able to do something about it to get them a better deal. And we don't think, on balance, that we can negotiate further because the DWP have made it clear they don't intend to negotiate further on it. So we've come out at this stage to consult members and say, this is what we've negotiated. We accept it's not good for everybody, but on balance, it will benefit financially over 60% of the workforce, and we therefore ask people to either accept it, or if we decide to reject it, to be clear about what the consequences would be. I've explained to you the consequences of rejection are that the offer is imposed by the department. In order to stop that imposition, our next logical step would have to be an industrial action strategy.
We've rejected deals in the past that
Yeah.
we've imposed.
But then
We've
they're
rejected them and
imposed.
failed
But
to take effective action when
the
we
difference
could
with this is the contractual changes, and the difference with this is that the consequence of rejecting won't be that it is imposed and that's the end of it. It will be it's imposed with the contractual changes without the safeguards, and we think the safeguards are too important to give
So
up.
we've already brought in contractual changes for the people who came in after 2008.
Yeah.
Did we reject that? And did we fail to
But
do
we have-
anything about that? And are they not covered by collective agreement as well?
People that came in after 2008 are on different contracts,
Yeah, it's
and
all
so
they-
you make it, you accept your employment on the basis of the contract that you're presented with, and if they've accepted their offer of work with that contract, that's the contract they're employed under. That, in a way, is part of the issue, isn't it? Because a number of people, 22%, have those contracts. So for them, it won't be about giving up contractual rights. For a number of others of us, it will be about a contract that is not as beneficial as the one we're currently on.
but
The money is in excess of 1%. Nobody's going to stand here and say it's a fantastic deal, but there has to be a degree of a reality check about what you would do about it. It's not enough to say reject it, this is crap. You can reject it by all means, but what's the consequence of rejection? We lose the
We're
safeguards.
failing to take appropriate action. We've
Do you-
started
so are you
campaign
arguing that we
after
should?
campaign since I've been in the union.
Okay.
1 and 2 day strikes. It's got us nowhere.
Okay.
And the campaign tails away and dance to be replaced by the next.
So what is the strategy then? What do you believe?
Vote a new national executive committee who won't be
Okay.
working Saturdays at 8 o'clock at 1 night a week.
Well, they will, won't they? Because
Well, they
they're all
They won't be sat on the
yeah.
phone like us on
Of course they will. Yes, the-
from a full Saturday, take an angry call.
Facility time is capped at 50%. All of our executive have official jobs, but that's not the issue, is it? The issue is are you arguing for sustained industrial action strategy? Is that what you think we should do? And if that is what you think we should do, do the people in this room agree with that? And would people be prepared? We wouldn't get it with 1 or 2 day strike action. Actually, you're right. That would be a protest.
Targeted action, the union's taken targeted action in certain districts.
Targeted action would be paid action.
And
do you think we could
where
pay
people's pay and
over
conditions
50,000 members to come out on indefinite strike action? Because that might push the government back, but we could bankrupt the union. And so there has to be a degree of reality about what we're asking people. It's very, it's absolutely fine to say sustained industrial action, but that wouldn't be paid industrial action. That would be members losing money to try and achieve more. And our assessment is that we wouldn't achieve more through sustained industrial action. So, by all means, there's nothing wrong with saying this is not good enough, but there has to be a degree of reality about what we would do. I think there also has to be a degree of reality about the climate we're in. These people aren't our friends. The government are not our mates. They are not people that are thinking, what can we do to improve living conditions for DWP workers? They are people that are trying to smash the public sector. They've imposed a 1% pay cut across the public sector. They are trying to destroy the NHS. The idea that they're going to go out and say, oh God, the DWP staff are really angry, we need to give them something better, is a bit pie in the sky. But would we be able to get significant concessions to make it worthwhile? Nobody's frightened of taking on the government. This department's delivered more industrial action than any other part of PCS. But it's always with a view to getting something better for members. It's always about trying to make gains or concessions. And I'm not clear what gains and concessions we think we could achieve with the level of industrial action we think we could mount when 60% of our members are getting a huge pay increase. Not everybody, and I'm the first to hold my hand up and say it's better for some than it is for others. Nobody's going to stand here in front of you and tell you this is an amazing victory. But it is a degree of reality about what could we do about it, and would that action achieve something better for people who had lost pay in order to support the union in strikes. So it's not a simple decision, and I absolutely take your point that when you went on strike in 1984, things were obviously different. But where we are now with this government and with this offer is that the union, the offer divides the membership. It means it will be good for some people, it will not be good for others. That is not the ground, we don't believe, to launch a mass industrial action campaign. But there will be issues where we will be able to unite members around defending flexi, around working conditions, around things that people hold dear, and that's the balanced judgment we've come to. I don't know where to start, so yeah.
Just one quick question. If we do go with yourselves,
Yes,
yes,
okay.
and then you say, oh, we can opt out.
Yes.
My concern is that we take you from the first thing saying, yes, I accept, and you won't be able to opt out later on because they said, oh, you've agreed and you signed up to it.
No, the opt-out's written in. If you read the actual, rather than just the PCS briefing, read that, and it describes the opt-out. It's written in detail about what the consequences are of opting out, but also the fact that you can do that, and that will be part of it, And we know there will be people that will just say, for me, I'm just going to opt out. That's my choice.
Excuse me, can I say the opt-out was not on the question?
Yeah, I'll try to share it and I'll sort of...
This lady over here.
All I'm asking is people opting out, right, will it affect the box market? Will the manager then say you're not up for us for our business? That's what I worry about.
They won't be again, do
when you're your box market now is
non-consolidated relevant.
It shouldn't have any bearing on box markets
That would
other
be
than...
illegal.
The only,
is there some clause that you're going to have?
if you have a read, the only thing it says is that you will make a decision that's right for you, including, if you choose it, the decision to opt out. The consequence of that is they can only hold you to hours within your legacy contract. So for most of us who are pre-2007, that legacy contract will say 8:36 till 5. There should be no other consequence to opt out. You would still qualify for the non-consolidated payment, but as I've explained, the non-consolidated payment will go down.
Year after, and
Yeah.
sit in front of your manager, they cannot use that
No,
against
no,
you.
and
Is there something written?
Well, check. It's
They
legal.
can't-
It's your legal
two issues
contract.
are linked.
You're not prepared to be, you know.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
your concern.
So
I mean,
we
that's-
will back somebody if the manager then
Yeah,
said to...
of course we would. Yeah, that's
Well, yeah,
the case.
solicitor would as well, because the breach of your
Can I ask-
contract of
one
employment.
of you.
So,
Can I ask why you keep referring to DWP who don't work the hours that CMG do?
That's right.
but we'll be pulled straight onto the CMG hours. So we'll be working 8 o'clock straight away and a Saturday straight away.
Wasn't that something that was starting in January for CMG?
But not
No, I've had to,
but DWP, as all of the paperwork states, has been vague about when they will bring these in. CMG will do it like that, but DWP can do it in 2019 and still accept this
some parts
pay
of
rise.
DWP are working different, like PM.
Not until lately, aren't you?
They are.
I checked
they
it
are.
all out
Well,
online.
PM is part of DWP, and they're trying to do it separately as well.
I mean, what they're saying to us is there will be no change to anybody's working hours unless people already work those hours. So in other words, if you're already on a contract that compels you to work evenings and Saturdays, that won't alter as a result of this. But for those people that aren't, there will be no change before October 17. If it's something different is being said locally, then that needs to be escalated by your branch to the group office.
Right, so if I work for CMG and
some do like the meetings that people were coming round, like last Thursday or something, some bloke from design came up to us. Well, most of us already do it anyway. Well, and he said, oh, it'll be October, however, because most of you already do it, we'll just enforce it from January next year.
Do you get anything?
That's what we had.
If that is being said, you need to email me so that we can intervene and talk about that to stop that. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you've been very patient.
I'm an AA and I've been told, yes, and I've been told that there's not going to be no AA for roles in Department for Work and Pensions after 17 and 18.
Right.
Now, I'm definitely opting out for this contract. Now, I'm thinking we're going to pay rise from 2016 to 2019.
Yeah.
And like I'm saying, after 2017, 18, I don't know where I'll be. They could move her around, etc. like that.
It is the case that the DWP in their long-term strategy don't see a future for the AA role.
Right.
But if you remember, when they first threatened AAs with compulsory redundancy, we balloted all members spoke to support them, and we were able to scrap those compulsory redundancies. They've never actually made a compulsory redundancy at that grade. However, I think it would be naive to assume that that's always going to be the case. There's no doubt, but that in the future there will be less AAs.
Exactly.
But having said that, there won't be less work to do. There won't be anything
that
you're doing that doesn't still need doing, and we would fight that. I mean, that's not really linked to the employee deal, but I take your point that there's a bit of uncertainty about your role and the future of that role, and I think we would have to take it up at a point where there was any suggestion that you could be moved or your job role would be changed. But at the moment, they're not saying there will be no AAs. They're saying in their long-term plan, they don't see a future.
But every time I'm trying to talk to me line manager or me manager, both of them, I'm getting no impression of them saying, oh, if there's no job after 2017, 18 for you, and they can't find anything, they'll just send her away with a redundancy package, something like that.
Well, that would be, if it was a compulsory redundancy again, that would be something we would take up nationally, because there'd be no forced compulsory redundancies as part of the balloting for strike actions to stop them, and we would continue to take that view. But clearly, unless that's actually on the table and they're saying to you that is what's going to happen, we can't take it up. But if they're not dealing with any of your issues as a result of saying your job won't exist after next year, you do need to escalate that with us and take that.
Can I just ask, one of the areas you haven't covered is for SEO above.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And I mean, we had quite a heated argument with the DWP about who should be in scope for this. DWP got the business case on the basis of flexibility up to the HEO grade. For those above the HEO grade, it would be a 1% increase across the board. PCS already has pay policy that says we reject all deals that are capped at 1%. So we have rejected the SEO to grade 6 offer without a bother, because that's already existing union policy. That will be imposed, and that will just be a 1% increase. But they're not subject to the same contractual changes either. Having said that, there will probably be an expectation that they'll be expected to lead from the front or whatever. So there's no doubt that there will be a requirement on them to work hours that their teams are working. but they're not subject to the same changes, they're not in line for the same pay increases. So their deal is an annual deal, it's negotiated every year in line with public sector pay policy, it's capped at 1%.
So ACS are rejecting that.
Yeah, we have a blanket position of rejection.
Type of thing, then?
Sorry.
When the vote comes out the road,
Yeah.
how would you vote? Would we get a separate vote?
Yes,
How would
we're
that
currently exploring the logistics of how we can ballot people in certain grades. There's two ways of doing it. You either ask every branch in the DWP, there are 108 branches, to identify everybody on their union membership list who's SEO and above. In most job centre branches that won't be a big task. In some of the headquarters buildings it will be, and clearly that requires quite a bit of work. So one option is to ballot only the people of those grades, but in order to do that you have to be able to identify all the members that don't qualify for the ballot. Or you send out a ballot paper to everybody and say only complete this if you're AA to HO, and you know that's a degree of trust that we need to consult we are consulting the National Union Electoral Reform Society about whether that would pass the test, if you like, for what constitutes a statutory ballot, and whether we're bound by law that says that isn't a robust enough way of ballot, making sure you ballot the right people. What you have to be able to demonstrate is that you've made every effort to ballot the correct people. And what would be the consequence of an SEO to grade 6 filling in one of our ballot papers? Would that materially change the result? And those are things that we're exploring in the Electoral Reform Society now in advance of the ballot that will take place in June. But you're right, when people signed up to direct debit, one of the questions was not what grade are you, and of course when people get promoted it isn't always the first thing you do to contact the union and tell them you've been promoted. So sometimes the data we hold about members by grade isn't accurate or up to date. Even on the global address list, not everybody is defined by grade, and so it is quite a large task in some offices and some branches to identify who's
And you said we're not contractually involved in this.
This
again,
deal.
You wouldn't sign up to. You wouldn't be expected to sign up.
There's
to
nothing
anything
in
on our
there's
end.
no contractual changes proposed for people in the SEO to grade 6. But the reverse of that is there's no additional money either. It's just as an
That's fine. As long as that again, you wouldn't be penalised because you haven't signed up to do that.
It's a request, not a question.
Yeah, go on.
I would just like to request my fellow colleagues to vote for, to accept, to protect the people, to have a collective agreement and not be left on their own, and then opt out if they feel strongly about it. As another person, I would like to protect me as a lower paid person, to be in that collective and have some safeguards rather than and then opt out separately if I don't agree, just to protect your other union members and your other colleagues.
The ones
That
that
was
have
my
been paying my
request.
subs for 40 years.
Being on straight.
I mean, it's up to you. There's no need to take a vote, but this is more about informing you and consulting you about the negotiations. But if you feel strongly you would like to take a vote, we should. I think, you know, to answer the point, you're absolutely right. People have been loyal to the union for a long time, and there's no doubt that people lower down the scale will do better financially than people at the max, and there's no getting away from that. But that is also the only way you're ever going to reduce the pay scales and move to a spot rate, and so, you know, that is the consequence of having shorter or no pay scales.
It just basically means that the ones who have worked for 40 odd years managed to get their max, for whatever reasons. It looks as though they're now on they've been on a sort of like a pay restraint for the past 6 years enforced by governments, etc. And it looks now as though our union is complying with this request to restrict for another 4 years. So do you think, I'm not talking about fairness or anything like that, but do you think it's reasonable for the future that for a period of 10 years, somebody, the maximum for our work has been virtually held stagnated?
Absolutely not acceptable.
You know, but you're in compliance with that because I don't know how far you fought to get more than 1.6%.
When you say fought, what do you mean by that?
Argued. Because I don't negotiated, argued, whatever you want to call it.
We argued for 4 months, and
so what did they start off
are
at?
exhausted.
What was the original offer then for those on the max? Was it 1.6 then?
For those on the max, they have not shifted
So,
their position.
yeah,
The
so
people at the bottom.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you've negotiated for 4 months.
Yeah.
So was the offer at the very beginning for those on the max 1% or 1.6
The offer at
or
the
whatever?
very beginning was with no safeguards. So
That's not answering the question. Was it 1.6%?
That is the deal.
Was it 1.6% at the very beginning?
It was a smaller. They go away and they model different pay arrangements.
Yeah, pretend that they're doing something and they
what
come
we
back.
could have done and what we looked at doing first was front loading the deal so that people got more in year 1 than they get in year 4. So in other words, you get a bigger benefit as a result of opting in. If they did that, people would have had significantly less than 1% in years 3 and 4 because of the 5% cap on any individual increase. So therefore, to balance it out across the 4 years gives everybody more than 1%. Now we accept that isn't much more than 1%, and in the case of an EO, 1.6%, and an AO, slightly less than that. But it is also the case that there isn't another way of doing this.
I just look at it from a 10-year point, 10-year period.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about me personally. Well, I will, but the point being that these people now who are fighting for the increases at the lower end, they're going to be faced with a maximum